Welcome to the Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast, episode number 140. Taylor Shire alongside Darrell Davis with another edition of this podcast talking about the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And so far, Darrell, we're talking about a team that's 4-0 to start the season. Their latest victory last Thursday over the Toronto Argonauts, 30-23 was the final result, with Shea Patterson picking up his first win in his first career start. What did you like about that game last week from the Riders?
They got better, Taylor. They started slowly, including especially Shea Patterson. He didn't look comfortable at first, but by the time the second quarter rolled around, he was completing 3-4 straight passes in a row. Seemed to really get a rhythm going, and even better after halftime. It's like they made some adjustments. Offensive coordinator Mark Mueller's getting credited for that. They seemed to step things up a little bit. So it was good to see them improve. We figured there would be some nerves. That's what all the questions were about to Shea Patterson early on. Are you going to be anxious? Are you going to be nervous? No, I'll be fine. But he was, and so he should be. It meant a lot to him, as you could tell in post-game interviews. So the fact that he got better, good sign. The fact the defense won another game, that's not a bad sign either. It's that defense that just keeps mauling things
it kind of feels like a long time ago last Thursday.
For the Roughriders.
Riders are already going to be back on the field this week in preparation for Saturday's game in BC. But thinking about that, win over the Argos to improve to 4-0, sure, Shea Patterson played a good game and deserved the win, but man, that defense, 5 turnovers, 4 interceptions on Cameron Dukes, and that's exactly kind of the recipe. If you want to help out a younger quarterback or an inexperienced quarterback, you need a defense to step up. And not only did they have 5 picks, but they scored. They put points on the board when Marcus Sales returned that one back. So I think, Shea Patterson, yes, deserves a lot of the credit, but I'm going to hang this one on the defense.
You're right. The Riders did to Cameron Dukes what the Argos were trying to do to Shea Patterson. The Argos blitzed like crazy. That one touchdown pass that Shea Patterson threw to Samuel Emilus, there were 7 guys blitzing, 7 Argonauts coming after him, and he just needed a little dump pass over the middle. And like Emilus said, I didn't have many guys to beat. He did make a really nice move. I've never seen that kind of a roll over a tackler before. And Emilus is really good at that, at finding space, isn't he, when he catches the football? And obviously there was more space with 7 guys blitzing, but that's what Toronto wanted to do. They weren't as effective after Jake Serezna got hurt. He's a tremendous defensive end for the Argonauts, but they still tried it and weren't that effective. But Saskatchewan's defense, without blitzing too often, created those 5 turnovers. And you're right, Marcus Sales, a return. I keep thinking, after that first game, I thought, they should cut Marcus Sales. He's horrible because he had 2 or 3 breakdowns that cost them big plays in their first game. And Corey Mace, head coach, kept saying, he'll be fine. And he was. He's gotten better because he's a veteran. He understands what's required from him, and he's done a really good job and fit right into that defense.
This week, and he's certainly going to be a guy I'm going to feature because, yes, he had his debut a few weeks ago. He got knocked out cold in his second game, and I wrote about that and kind of how he bounced back. And, he went back to the locker room and seemed to be fine despite being knocked out cold moments prior. Started the next game and obviously had a huge interception. So what's he got in store for his 4th game? Well, it's against his former team, the one that just cut him. So I imagine there's going to be a little bit of motivation for him this week.
Yeah, some players admit it, that they say, I want to prove something to them. But some players say, no, it doesn't mean anything. But it always means something playing against your former team, especially a team that lets you go. And Sales has done a really good job. Because he's there now, that allowed them to move Lacombo into safety. Jaden Dahlke, who we've all liked and made the team as a late round draft pick, isn't a great coverage player. He's a really good hard hitter at safety, and I think that made a lot of teams aware of where he was. But Lacombo's a much better cover player, so it's helped their secondary in terms of coverage. I think that's a great addition. They've had to balance things out to find where they're going to put the American-Canadian ratio, but it really has. Sales' arrival has really solidified. Round of that way, it took a couple games, but it really solidified that second.
From that win, but what was sort of the bad takeaways from that victory?
Well, once again, a penalty hurt them right at the end of the first half. They gained 2 yards, and then Jarrett Stearns was called offside, and they were trying to set up a field goal. We were wondering if Corey Mace was aware of the time. He seemed to do a pretty good job with clock management, but that penalty pushed them back. They lost the 2 yards of rushing gain and went back 5. So all of a sudden, Brett Lother, who's so dependable, is kicking a 57-yarder, and that's a bit of a crapshoot sometimes, and he missed it. It seemed like such a close game that might have been devastating points to lose, but they recovered from that. Corey Mace at the end of the game even joked about, hey, come on, Mace, smarten up, because he was thinking of going for that touchdown late in the game because his offensive lineman obviously said, let's go for it. We're 3rd and goal. No, you're up 7. Just kick that easy field goal, go up 10 points. And obviously Toronto did get a field goal back, but was still down. If Saskatchewan had lost that one. So Corey Mace, as calm as he looks on the sidelines, once in a while that thought process might be getting a little bit shaky. So good for him he called a timeout and then took the right thing. I see that they were trying to rotate their defensive lineman, but Shabir got hurt. And they dressed one guy short. They took Miles Brown out of the lineup. So it's tough. They did use the new import. You can pronounce his name.
Maldonado.
I'm sorry about that. I haven't memorized his name very well, and I apologize. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Played pretty well, but they've got to get that rotation going because Micah Johnson and Anthony Lanier are playing very well. So those are the type of things, as you said, they're very tiny things, but good teams will look at those things and say, these are things we have to do better. We learned from this. Let's move forward, because you're never perfect until you lift the Grey Cup over your head.
It's a terrible start. Like, this really was a 3-quarter performance from this team. The first quarter was absolutely terrible. They not only let a punt return touchdown go back to open the scoring, but I think they had 1 first down and only 1 pass completion in the first quarter alone. So if you look at sort of the first 15 minutes, it was not going to be a recipe for success for that game. So, the good with the bad is that they handled that adversity, made the adjustments, got more comfortable, and obviously tightened up the cover unit to not let, Janarian Grant had a few more returns after that, but didn't take any back to the house like he did on, I believe, the first punt of the game.
Yeah, and their 4 victories, Taylor, that's such a good point. They've won 3 of them by basically coming from behind, that they didn't lead right from the start. They did beat Hamilton that one game, led start to finish, and that it seemed to be the turning point for them, right? Because you don't want to have to pull irons out of the fire at the end all the time, which they've been able to do to their credit, but you'd like to sometime just put it on cruise control right from the beginning, and they're not able to do that yet. I don't know why, but it's interesting to watch how well they recover and how well they respond and calm down to win these football games. But I think if you ask Corey Mace and his coaches and the players too, they would say, yeah, it'd be really nice just to win one from the start, like return that opening kickoff, and then it's our game all the way through. But they haven't been able to do that yet, but I think they probably will somewhere along the line.
In terms of Shea Patterson, we've seen him before in limited action, short yardage, but do you think he has what it takes to keep progressing and be a starting quarterback, whether it's for this team or for another team in the years to come? And if he keeps playing like this, do they rush Trevor Harris back? How does that situation play out?
Yeah, it's almost a benefit that they put Trevor Harris on the 6-game injury list. It means that Shea Patterson doesn't have to look over his shoulder constantly. Like, I don't want Trevor Harris to be hurt. That's not what I meant by that. And it's not good for him to be missing 6 games, because they can bring him back early. But the fact that they didn't put him on the 1-game injury list, I think, is probably a real reassurance to Shea Patterson. He says, okay, I've got the reins of this offense for a little while. Let's see how I do with it. And I don't have to worry about them saying, oh, Trevor, you got to come back. You got a sore leg, a sore knee, but you got to come back and play. So I think that that's not a bad situation in the long haul, because this is really the gauntlet of their schedule. I've said that quite a few times, that Toronto, they handled Toronto quite easily. They've got, what a tough game coming up. We'll talk about that later, but going to BC on Saturday. Then they've got Winnipeg, and Winnipeg won its first game, and we knew that the Bombers would be stronger. And then they play Montreal. So it's a tough 4-game stretch, and probably Shea Patterson is going to play all 4 of those games and allow Trevor Harris to rest, which is a good idea. And it allows Shea Patterson to get better. Let's see how he progresses, how he improves. Will they rush Trevor Harris back? I don't think so. I think that they're comfortable enough now, especially after winning that first game. If horrors all strike and they're 1-3 out of this 4, it's not going to kill them. If they win 2 out of the 4, that's pretty good too. Winning all 4 would be amazing. But I don't think they really have to panic. You asked about Shea Patterson. Is he developing? Yeah, you could see him get better just in that game from the playing time. His frame of mind is better. You and I watched him at training camp, and how good did he look and how confident did he look? It was his job if he took it, and he took it. So now he's got that confidence that he won a tough game. He's proud of that fact. It was very emotional for him watching him in the post-game interviews, and I think that he's ready for this. He wanted to prove to his teammates, the people he loves in that dressing room, that he can do it, and I think he's doing that.
And to me, there's so many similarities between him and Cody Fajardo and kind of how that's playing out. Obviously, we won't know what a few years down the road will look like, but Fajardo came to Saskatchewan as the short yardage guy with little fanfare. Shea Patterson did the same. Had a bit of experience in the league, came here, earned the backup job, then, was kind of thrust into the starting role when Zach Collaros got hurt. Trevor Harris goes down. Shea Patterson is now starting after being a short yardage guy only. So, we see where Cody Fajardo is now, and even what he did in that 2019 season with the Riders, kind of taking over for Collaros, and the Riders ended up trading Collaros, obviously, as Cody Fajardo took over. I don't necessarily think it's going to follow the same storyline with Trevor Harris. I'm not necessarily going to trade him. But to me, if Shea Patterson can continue to show it, then I think you stick with him.
Yeah, and they need a quarterback of the future, right? Trevor Harris is 38, and we were worried, and I'm sure the Roughriders were worried. He's coming off major knee surgery, and he was probably going to get injured sometime this year. You never want that, but he is injured. He's 38 years old, and does he recover as well? He works his tail off, and we give him all credit for that. But you do have to plan ahead, and maybe Shea Patterson, it looked like in training camp, he took that step where he can now become a valid, bona fide backup quarterback and maybe become that starter. So if he keeps continuing on the curve that he's on, Taylor, I think he's got a chance to become the quarterback of the future. Will he be the greatest one ever? Maybe not, but will he be good enough to win them some games? Probably, if he continues with the confidence and with the maturation and the improved level, right, with Mark Mueller and those other guys helping him. If he continues to get better at this stage, and maybe down the road, a year or two, Trevor Harris says, okay, see ya, the Riders are in good shape with Shea Patterson. Maybe we're jumping the gun here a little bit, but it seems to be a good curve for them to follow.
And I always get, whether it's people talking to me or emails in my inbox saying, oh, the Riders need to develop a quarterback. We need to bring in quarterbacks and develop them. And we've talked about it before. You can't take a year or two to develop a quarterback. It's basically have guys that have the tools and are capable, and then when they get a chance, it's sink or swim. They get a chance through, for the most part, it's going to be injury. You really don't see too many times where they bring in a quarterback and you say, okay, you can develop, and then here, we'll hand you the reins over. It has happened before, but it's usually injury. It's usually, okay, this is your time to sink or swim, and this is how you develop quarterbacks. You make sure you have the right sort of bullpen of talent, and let them watch for a few years, let them develop through practice, and thrust them into the starting role. So that's basically exactly what they're doing with Shea Patterson. I don't think Jeremy O'Day and those guys are really getting enough credit for having that stable of talent, and eventually, that seeing it through to see if these quarterbacks, are bona fide starters.
Mm-hmm. During the offseason, when we said, well, why did they re-sign Mason Fine? Why did they bring back Antonio Pipkin? We didn't see them having any role for those guys. Shea Patterson didn't look great last year, but when you looked at them going to training camp, and then they brought in Jack Cohen from Notre Dame, you look at them at training camp and you say, you know what? They have 4 quarterbacks on the roster, all of whom have started or played a little bit. I guess Patterson hadn't at that stage. Played a little bit, had CFL playing experience. Not many teams could have said that. So it wasn't a bad situation. The way it played out, well, I thought, why did you re-sign Mason Fine? Well, it gave you some depth and you proved one way or the other. So they dumped Mason Fine. They didn't even give Antonio Pipkin a chance, which was okay. He didn't have much of a showing, but they did develop. They had a pretty good core when you think about it at training camp. It was a fair and legitimate competition. You and I have talked so often that Mason Fine has never improved since he's been here, it seems like, but Shea Patterson had. So you're right. Throw him in, see if he can do it, sink or swim. And for the 4 games, probably 4 games, he doesn't have to really worry about getting yanked out early, right? Especially, you asked that question of Corey Mace right at the end of training camp. This is a good situation. A good veteran, proven quarterback in Trevor Harris, an up-and-comer in Shea Patterson, and a brand-new rookie in Jack Cohen, who seems to catch on quite quickly. He doesn't have to worry about Jack Cohen pressuring him for a job either, right? So he can be a little bit more relaxed in that respect. Shea Patterson can. I think they're on, as I said, the right path for development. Is he going to be great? We're going to see, right? But you mentioned the defense helped them out, the offense helped them out, and they did a pretty good job considering they lost another offensive lineman, right? That they were playing a little bit short staff. They were missing Sean Bain Jr. with their one of their top receivers. So the fact that offense did so well and scored 30 points against a pretty good Toronto defense is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. And one of the questions that you asked last week was about, if they thought about bringing in Mason Fine. They signed Eric Barrier instead, and to me, that's one of those over-the-shoulder type of things where Shea Patterson doesn't have to look at Eric Barrier behind his shoulder. But if Mason Fine is in there, he's a guy with several starts. Shea Patterson, if he was named the starter, would certainly be looking over his shoulder because the Riders could go back to Mason Fine at any given time. So I think it's sort of, crediting the management staff again, kind of a bolder move to go into a game with 3 quarterbacks with 0 combined starts. That's what they did last week with those 3 quarterbacks. It's
not when you want to. And as we said, at training camp, they had all that experience, and then all of a sudden it changes, which is strange, but it's worked out okay. You make such great points with Barrier and Jack Cohn and the situation. It's Shea Patterson's to do it, and he better do it.
Yeah, and just to me, just the confidence that they said, okay, this is time to sink or swim. You don't have to look over your shoulder. Be calm. Here's the controls. You can have it for 4 games, however long it is. You're the guy until Trevor Harris is healthy, and if you continue to play them, here's your opportunity, right? There's an unlimited amount of games if you show us that you can play. So I really like the move to bring in Barrier, not bring in Mason Fine or another experienced veteran. What they did there. So yes, as you mentioned before, now they go to BC on Saturday. BC just beat Hamilton 44-28, I believe it was on the weekend, to 4-1. So we have a 4-0 team versus a 4-1 team, basically 1 and 2 in the West Division standings right now, and probably the game of the week, if not the game of the year so far for the Riders.
Oh yeah, that's a really good matchup, isn't it? We're finding out every week. It seems like we're saying, okay, we're going to find out how they are, how good they are. The first 3 weeks, well, they played the 2 teams that haven't won a game, Edmonton and Hamilton. So you say, oh, good. Okay, they're better than the basement dwellers. So you know that they've moved up. Okay, Toronto's look pretty good. We're going to see how they play against a decent team who's got some Grey Cup experience from a couple of years ago. Oh, they beat Toronto. They beat them fairly, not really handily, but held together and beat the team. Now, this is another big step forward. You're going to find how much they've progressed, because when you watch, I'm sure you watched that BC game, Vernon Adams Jr. looked pretty good at offense, running the offense for BC. He's got some amazing receivers. They're mixing in a little bit of a running attack, and they've got a solid defense, as they have had for years and a few years now. So this, and it's on the road too, I think, which is a real test for the Roughriders. It's tough playing Vancouver. I know it's not a really late game, but the time change is different. Traveling to Vancouver is a little bit different. Even if the dome's closed, it's pretty humid in there. So this is going to be a good physical, psychological, and a good road test for the Roughriders.
Yeah, I think Vernon Adams had 4 touchdown passes by the half, and then he looked remarkable. Justin McInnes, I think he's kind of one of the, I don't even know if I want to call him a breakout player, because I think he was a first-round pick, but he's just had a remarkable year in BC this year. Obviously a former Rider.
He didn't look like this in Saskatchewan, did he?
I don't know if he didn't get the opportunities or what, but he was even vetoed by Braden Lenius for that first starting job a few years ago. So McInnes kind of started as a backup, and now he's I wouldn't call him he's kind of 1A, 1B with Hollins in BC this year. He's, like I said, a pretty remarkable start for him.
Yeah, and they're waiting for another receiver to come back. Keenan Hatcher is on the injury list. So how explosive is that offense going to be? I don't think Hatcher plays this week against Saskatchewan, but they're a solid football team, and we're going to find out. There's no shame in losing to the BC Lions. It shows that they're a decent team, and that might be the rivalry this year. That might be the team they're fighting with. At the moment, it looks like the team that they'd be fighting with for first place, because Edmonton hasn't won. Calgary doesn't look very good. So, and Winnipeg is a long way back. The front runners right now are Saskatchewan and BC. So we're going to see something, and they're going to be watching everybody, how they play each other and how each other does on different scoreboards as the season progresses, because that might be the first place matchup that we're watching for as the season goes along.
Yeah, and this is one of the games where I'm kind of looking at the response, and then maybe, after. So if they get blown out, how do they respond against Winnipeg? Mm-hmm. If they win, obviously the confidence is going to roll against Winnipeg. Or if it's close, next week against the Bombers, can they sort of, if the Riders lose by a close margin, can they bounce back, right? So I think this will be a true test, obviously depending on the outcome, but I think that sort of response, how they handle that adversity if they do, fall short this week, I think will be big, because if you lose to to BC, lose to Winnipeg, then you have a very short week traveling to Montreal for a Thursday night game. That doesn't really set up a good 3-game stretch. They could easily find themselves 0-3 if they somehow can't manage to handle whatever happens in BC and respond against Winnipeg.
You're right. It's the last 3 quarters of this tough gauntlet for them. The real test for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. If they can get to Vernon Adams, remember, didn't he get sacked 6 times in a game earlier this year, and then he gets intercepted 4 times? There's the amazing Vernon Adams who's up here, and the Vernon Adams who performs down here sometimes. You think, wow, how is he the same guy? So we'll see how the Roughriders attack him and what they can do, what type of pressure they can do. Their secondaries played really well. That linebacking core, Jameer Thurman is. Man, we're just finding out what a great player he is. So, like, he's been with Calgary for a long time, and we knew he was good. But watching him and the way that they shut down the run, it's really impressive watching the linebacking core work with Rebus and Avery out there on the other side. So they've done a tremendous job of putting this defense together. Corey Mace's running it. They don't blitz as much as I thought, right? They're not Malik Henry and Brian Cox Jr., their starting ends, aren't really getting much pressure on the quarterback, but they're also making sure that they've got some containment, and that's what's keeping the running game from going crazy against them. So the things they're doing defensively, I want to see if they can do that against Vernon Adams Jr.
Yeah, they're not near the top of the league in sacks by any means, but the turnovers, I think it's 5 straight turnovers in back-to-back games. So, I think they lead the league in defensive takeaways, which is arguably one of the most important stats aside from the final score, of course.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? That's the one that you can look at the most. And the teams that win the turnover battles usually win, it's like 80-some% of the time win the game. So, that fluctuates year by year, but that's usually what it is. When you say that statistics are for losers, well, that's a statistic that means a lot. And that's one that they can look at, because they'll never admit that one play decides a football game, even though there are occasions that it does. But there are 2, 3, or 4 plays that will really change a football game, and the turnovers are usually the ones that you point to. So if they continue to take away the football with the regularity that the Roughriders have been doing it, I think they have a really good chance in Vancouver.
Yeah, and on the flip side, they have to keep protection of the ball on the offense. Shea Patterson did a good job, but he had a couple of close calls there, I think, on a couple of wide throws, but didn't have any picks, didn't have any fumbles, so I think that'll be a big thing for them to do again this week against the Lions.
That's really true. You're right. The fact that he didn't lose the game for them. Did he win it for them? No, the defense won it for him. But as long as your quarterback isn't throwing away the football game, you've got a good chance. And if he continues to play like that and gets a little bit better and gets that offense contributing a little bit more, I think the defense can hold the fort until he shows up.
All right, Darrell. Well, that'll do it for episode 140 of the Rider Rumblings podcast. Of course, the Riders are in BC this Saturday to take on the Lions. Thanks for joining me, as always.
You bet. See you at practice.